Hello, Ambius. It's August, and we have a new safety presentation for you. Today, we are going to do an introduction to the OSHA Warehouse and Dock Safety Program. Your safety is important in both Ambius facilities and in customer locations. First of all, if you are an Ambius forklift driver or Ambius warehouse manager, you will need to do the full U+ module on dock safety because this is such a specialized role. When you are walking or working in any warehouse or dock area, please keep in mind that a certain amount of PPE, personal protective equipment, is required. You need to be wearing your shoes with slip-resistant soles, you need to have eye protection, and you should have a high-visibility vest. In areas that have motorized equipment, the vest should also include lights. If there is any risk at all of bumping your head or a head injury, you need to be wearing a bump cap or hard hat. Both OSHA and Rentokil are considering your safety first when they make these requirements. When entering any dock area or warehouse area, please use your situational awareness skills to be alert to marked walkways and other signage. Changes and unfamiliar floor surfaces can increase the risk of slipping, tripping, or falling. Be aware that a dark space can prevent you from seeing risks and hazards. Equipment movement and noise can cause additional distractions. Stay alert and focused at all times to avoid risks and hazards from forklifts and other equipment. Our own facilities present certain risks and hazards also, and everyone is responsible for keeping them safe. An open dock door without a truck there is a fall hazard. Each dock door should have a gate and/or be closed. Do not jump or climb from a dock door or a truck. Even when there is a truck backed into your dock, there are certain dangers present. A gap can exist between the back of the truck and the wall of the dock. This is a dangerous place where your foot can get caught and you can easily fall. A dock leveler can bridge this gap, so if you have this equipment, use it. A dock plate is a simple piece of equipment that can also help bridge the gap. Be aware that most dock plates do have a space on either edge that can create a fall hazard. Trucks are frequently bringing important items to our buildings like plants, containers, and office supplies. Only trained and authorized colleagues should be using a forklift to unload items. Do not be tempted to drive or even sit on a forklift if you're not trained for it. A pallet jack is very helpful and simple to use. Be sure to ask for help if you need instructions. Remember to stay alert and focused, even in the familiarity and comfort of our own Ambius facilities. Watch for signage that will alert you to hazards on the floor. Lots of interior scape stuff can create a fall hazard when it's on the floor, so be sure to clean up your dock area and warehouse. And be sure to put out a cone or sign if there is a hazard that isn't marked. We're all responsible for safety. Our facilities are full of wonderful things to look at. Don't let it distract you from safety. Be sure to talk to your manager if you have ideas or suggestions on improving safety for yourself and others in your warehouse or dock area. Be prepared and ready with your PPE. You never can be sure what's around the next corner. Also, if you are a forklift driver or warehouse manager, please go to U+ and complete the OSHA Dock Safety module. Thank you for your time and attention today. Please go home safe.
Happy August, and we will start with a review of the quiz that we had. We had a quiz on pruning in July. Thank you to all of you that participated in the quiz. And I just want to review the quiz, the questions in the quiz, and what the correct answers are. Unfortunately, most of you did a really good job here, and I'm glad to see that. The first question on the quiz was, which of the following is a reason to prune interior plants? Is it to reduce stretching? Is it to remove dead, dying, or infested shoots? To improve the appearance of the plant? To improve the health of a plant? Or all of the above? The correct answer is all of the above. And most of you got that correct. There's many different reasons to prune indoor plants, and pruning can help improve the appearance of our plants and also the longevity of our plants by improving the health. Okay, next question. When pruning indoor plants, which of the following is most desirable and practical? Okay, so again, we're talking about indoor plants here. Are we going for a perfectly shaped plant, an oval to oblong form, a unicorn-shaped plant, or are we striving for natural form? Most of you got this correct. We're going for natural form. That's going to be the best looking, longest lasting plant that we can have indoors. Don't go for that perfect globe shape. It just doesn't work indoors over the long term. Okay, heading cuts on a plant, heading cuts, will cause a plant to do which of the following? Will heading cuts make the canopy thinner, or will it make the canopy thicker and bushier? The correct answer, most of you got this correct, the correct answer is heading will make the canopy thicker and bushier. Okay, that's different from thinning cuts. Thinning cuts will cause the canopy to be thinner, but heading cuts will not make it thinner, it will make it bushier. Next question, and this is one that a few people got wrong. Which of the following best describes the practice of hedging? Is hedging cutting a plant to create a perfect linear or global shape? Or is it selectively thinning undesirable shoots? Is it selectively heading back overgrown shoots? Or is it weaving branches together to encourage grafting? When you hedge a plant, you're not selectively cutting into certain stems. You're just cutting anywhere and everywhere to create a perfect linear or global shape. And that's not something we want to do indoors. We mentioned the reasons why. Pruning is about selectively choosing stems and saying, hey, I'm going to cut this stem in this location. That's selective, and that's what pruning is. Hedging is not like that. Hedging is just cutting anything that happens to get in the way. Okay, next question. Which part of the plant is primarily responsible for making food for the plant? The making of the food. Some of you got this wrong, but I think you're on the right path. So it's the leaves of the plant that actually make the vast majority of the food for the plant. That's where the food is made in photosynthesis. Those leaves are what absorb the light and where that chemical reaction takes place. A number of you answered roots, and the roots do store food that the plant makes and distribute that food, but the food isn't made in the roots. It may be held there, but it's actually made in the leaves. The reason I put that question in there, those leaves, if you don't have enough leaves, especially indoors where light is already low, then you're not going to have much food made for that plant. In fact, if you get rid of the leaves, eventually you're not going to have any food made for those shoots, and those shoots will eventually die off. So the leaves are very valuable, especially indoors. All right, next up, the interior of a plant canopy will often have dead twigs and weak shoots that should be removed via pruning. Definitely true, especially indoors. Again, we have low light, we don't have great airflow. Ficus trees, classic example. Almost any interior tree, you're going to have some dead shoots in there, and we want to get rid of those. That's the easiest low-hanging fruit we can get rid of. Okay, interior ficus trees are to be pruned with precision to achieve a globe shape. Some of you got this wrong, but that's not what we want. We do not want to. We do not want to prune ficus trees like this. We don't want to prune them with precision to achieve a globe shape. So that is false. We want to prune to have natural form, and that leads to the next question. A healthy branch system has a good balance of leaves and stems. When you prune to have that globe shape, you get rid of a lot of valuable leaves, and you don't have a good balance of leaves and stems. So yes, we definitely want a branch system, a healthy branch system that has a good balance of leaves and stems. Really valuable when you're inside. The last question, topping trees is an acceptable pruning practice indoors. I really shouldn't have even said that topping is pruning because it's not. When you top a tree, just you're cutting off the tops of the trees wherever, and that is not acceptable. That does not create a good-looking tree or a healthy tree, and over the long term, the trees look very bad and have to be removed. So we do not want to top trees indoors. Our main technical topic for August is going to be on green walls. We've had requests to do more training on green walls, so we're going to talk about that. And I think because we just got done talking about pruning, it's a good segue into applying pruning practices and grooming practices to your green walls and why those practices are really important. And looking at some of the challenges that are faced with green walls, especially green walls that are indoors. I want to start by talking about, how do these challenges come about with green walls indoors? Most green walls indoors, if you're lucky and you have the space like this one designed specifically for plants and you have wonderful light, then the plants are going to do really, really well and not be as high maintenance and they'll actually grow. But most of the time, plants go in environments that are designed first and foremost for people and maybe make some accommodations for the plants by maybe putting in some lights and so forth. But in the process of all of this, we're really accommodating people with green walls. We're putting a lot of plants in a relatively small space, and they don't always get the light that they want. And on top of all of that, we're changing the orientation of these plants. The pots themselves are not just sitting on a tabletop perfectly level. We're actually putting them in at an angle. So all of this is going to create some inherent challenges with green walls. And I want to talk about what those are and what the cause of it is and some things that we can do about that. Some of the issues that you face with green walls is something called tropism. And I want to talk about what tropism is. The first one a lot of people are real familiar with, and that's called phototropism. And what that is very simple. You put a plant, for example, in a window, and if you don't rotate that plant, the plant starts to grow towards the window in the direction of the light. That's a natural response that plants do. They grow, the shoots grow in the direction of the light source. That's a tropism. Tropism is growing, it's responding to something in the environment like light or gravity or some other stimulus. So phototropism is one example. There's another tropism that's called geotropism or gravitropism, and that's a response to gravity. And what that does is the shoots of the plant, the above ground portion of the plant, grow in the opposite direction of gravity. For example, when you plant a seed in the ground or something like that, the plant starts to grow, the shoots start to grow up, and the roots start to grow down, and that is mainly a response to gravity. And the same thing will be seen with our plants. I mean, you can do this with any plant at home. If you take it and turn it on its side, you'll see that it will start to kind of grow at an angle in response to gravity. Basically, the shoots grow up, away from gravity, and the roots grow down towards gravity. In green walls, we see this a lot because we turn the orientation of the plant. We either turn it at like a 45-degree angle on the tray system walls, or in like a sage wall, we turn the plant, full 90 degrees. And as a result of that, the plant will start kind of growing out, and then it'll take a turn and start growing up. And most people think that that's just a response to light. And it is partially a response to light, but a lot of that is also a response to gravity in this geotropism. Our number one way of handling geotropism on green walls is like how we handle phototropism. We rotate the plant so that we balance it. We get it to start growing back in the other direction. And usually we can rotate the plant, but some systems you can't actually rotate the plant. So then the next best option that's available is different types of pruning practices that you can do. But I wanted to talk about that because it is something common that you'll see. Now, another thing with these tropisms is that you might see, for example, ivies and things like that, where the vines start growing downward over time. And you might think, well, I thought they're supposed to go in the opposite direction of gravity. And if the vine isn't clinging to something and it gets top heavy, that vine will actually start to go down eventually. And those vines and the other parts of the plant that are just too top heavy will actually start covering up other parts of the green wall and blocking out the light. And that leads to another topic that we have with green walls. In green walls, when they put plants in, they really cram the plants in. There's a lot of plants in a relatively small amount of space. Plants need a certain amount of light. They also need air, and they need space. And you pack them close together like that, especially when they start growing, there's a lot of competition for air and light and space. And when that competition is going on, there's definitely plants and parts of plants that end up struggling with that and getting stressed out by it. So we'll talk about throughout all of this ways of overcoming these tropisms that the plants experience in green walls, and also this heavy competition that's going on in ways that we can prune and groom. And that this stuff is all part of having an interior green wall. We're trying to do our best to have these plants look as good as they can for as long as they can. And that's definitely going to require quite a bit of maintenance on our end.
All right, so we've got a green wall here on a tray system. This is an ASI wall. And we've got some long vines. We've intentionally let these grow really long to show you what happens over time. There's some things that are nice about this, but there's a number of issues with this. And one is that these vines are going to start blocking the plants underneath and shading them out. And these plants will then basically start to die out and not look good over time. And that's not going to be good. We want to make sure that these plants underneath also have enough light. So it's a real common thing that you end up having to deal with in most green walls, is having some vines and some branches get really dominant and shade out other areas. Another issue with that is when these vines get really long, we also start to get up on the top of the plant more yellows. And sometimes, just leaves that also don't look good. There's a few other leaves on here that aren't completely yellow but don't look good. There's some leaves that are brown. You'll get more bad leaves up by the top of the plant when these long vines are allowed to do this. And finally, the long vines, you get out towards the very end, and usually, especially if you don't have really good light, it'll be kind of weak growth. It'd be kind of long vines, really long stems, and the shoots are not going to be especially well. And this is not just pothos that does this. This is most plants that you're going to have in a green wall. Things like Scheffleras and philodendrons, even dracaenas will do this type of thing. What I'm going to be focusing on is mostly just heading cuts. So I'm going to take these vines and I'm going to find a place to cut back to and just start making some cuts. Now, ideally, I would have done this much sooner. I wouldn't have waited this long, but just showing you some places to make these cuts, and then I'm going to come in and actually start grooming out some of the yellow leaves when I'm done with this. And you can see all this that I took off here. And by removing a lot of this is going to help the rest of that plant not get as many yellow leaves and last a lot longer. All right, now I didn't want to take out all of the vines because that would cause too much shock to the customer. So these other vines, we can get them on the next visit. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start grooming. I'm going to take out the yellow leaf. We got a number of different types of plants here. Again, we got a tray system wall, 6-inch plants. Dracaenas on these, the ability to prune these is kind of limited. There's not as many opportunities to prune Dracaenas as there is for something like pothos or another vining plant. A lot of your effort in maintaining Dracaenas is going to involve rotating these. If you rotate them, then it'll stop them from, what they'll do is they'll kind of grow up like that, up at an angle, and then they become impossible to rotate because they start growing up too much. So rotating Dracaenas will do a lot for extending the life of those. Sometimes you can come in and do a heading cut on a Dracaena. You know, use your best judgment with that, but the rotating is really important with Dracaenas. Also looking at some other types of plants in here, we've got some English ivy, some heterohelix here, and you know, again, very similar to the other types of plants we've been pruning. You know, we start to get some of these long vines, and you know, we don't need to prune them all back today, but just coming in and doing a heading cut on these is going to help keep these leaves on here and keep that plant fuller and longer lasting. Over here we've got some pothos and, you know, just a bad leaf right there. Just simply take a leaf like that out of there. And then the other really important thing I wanted to demonstrate that we were talking about with these pothos and keeping them full in the heart of the plant. If we have too many leaves out lingering out, these leaves out here are gonna, the leaves in here are gonna turn yellow before the leaves out on the vine. And so to preserve these leaves on the inside and to get the plant to last longer, you know, just finding this vine here, it's not really overgrown yet, but in a couple months it will be overgrown. So if we, on this service visit, could just take one of these vines, you know, maybe leave the others for right now, but on this service visit, come in and go ahead and find a suitable place to head it back to, like right here, and just head that back. In a couple weeks, I'll come in and maybe head this one back so this doesn't get too long. And then maybe a couple weeks or a month after that, I'll then head this vine back. And that is going to get these plants to last a much longer time. Okay, same thing on this one. I just pulled this marble, 6-inch marble plant out. And it looks like a really great plant right now, and it is a very good plant. We want to keep it that way. We want to maintain all of this here. So again, this vine here is starting to get pretty long. So on this service visit, it'd be a good idea to come in and just cut back to another leaf. So I'm just going to take this out right here like that. And I'm not going to do it today, but maybe in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, I would then come in and then cut another one of these back. And you'll find that this will last a very long time if you maintain them like that. So 6-inch Dracaena here. This is only 2 plants per pot. So if you headed one of these back, you know, it would really make it look pretty drastic in terms of pruning. So again, that's why that rotating is really important on these. And what these will do a lot in green walls is they will start growing out and then straight up. And they'll have kind of like a hockey stick shape to them. And at that point, they become very hard. You really can't rotate them at that point, and they become very difficult to prune. So that's why staying on top of the rotating is really the key with the Dracaenas in these. We've got an ASI Biomontage Live green wall. It's a smaller green wall, and it's a little tray system wall, and similar to the live picture with the kind of the decorative frame. This is all 4-inch plants, and there are a lot of 4-inch plants in this small area. So there's actually 12 4-inch plants right here. And there's a lot of plants just crammed together. And I want to talk about some of the things that are going to happen when those plants are crammed together. When you cram anything living together like this, you have a competition. Competition for light, competition for space, competition for air, and not everything ends up winning in that competition. And some of the shoots that you get developing don't look the greatest as a result of that. So we're wanting, this green wall is not going to be in the greatest of light. And we're going to anticipate that any new growth over time is not going to be the best new growth. I'm guessing because it's in lower light, the new growth that we're going to get on this is kind of longer vines and smaller leaves and just not the best looking plants overall. And I think also because of the lower light, we're going to get yellow leaves. The older leaves are going to start getting yellow first. So what I don't want this wall to do is get really long vines and not have leaves in the inner part of this green wall. What I'm going to do to prevent that from happening with these pothos is some heading cuts on here early on to help maintain the original plants and not worry about this kind of scraggly growth off the sides. Right over here, this is going to start to grow out, and I can prune this back to here, and now I'll help keep this plant and vine more compact. Same thing, there's another one right here. I'm just gonna cut that one back right there and look for maybe one or two more. I can see that here I'm starting to get some new growth, but it's not real strong growth, and I want to keep it compact, so I'll take that out. And then of course always look at the plants and see how they're doing, and remember that you're going to be back. You can always take off more at your next service visit. Also really important, again, just so many leaves in here. This is so compact. It's not how we would normally have plants. One thing about green walls is we really pack in a lot of plants in a really small area. And that does have an effect on the plants. The reason why we pack so many together is that it looks fuller and it doesn't look like there's any bare spots, but that does cause a significant amount of stress with the plants. So you can see there's a few bad leaves that are starting to develop, so we definitely want to take out the leaves that are starting to get brown. And as we take out these leaves, it's going to make it a less competitive environment, so that what is left behind is not going to turn yellow and not do well. That what's left behind is going to do better as a result of us taking that out. A real common thing in most green walls is this geotropism, and that's when the plant is, you can see because it's on it's not normally, normally plants like this and the plant will grow straight up. But when you turn it on its side, then the plant starts to grow the opposite direction of gravity. It's going to actually start to swing out and grow up. And the only way to really stop that or to reverse the effect of it is to rotate that plant. So we need to rotate this, and this plant hasn't been in its pot. It's only been in this green wall for maybe a month or so. So it doesn't take long for it to start doing this. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna rotate it 180 degrees like that and get this to then start growing back the other direction. The other thing I wanted to mention is the yellow leaves. And again, because the plants are packed in so tightly, it gets very dark on the inside, there's very little space, and there's very little air movement. And the plant is under stress. And when a plant is under stress, it's those lowest leaves that start to be sacrificed first. And you can see that here. This is the very lowest leaf, and it's one leaf that is turning yellow, it needs to be taken out. Now the next yellow leaf is going to be the next oldest leaf on that plant. And just a typical sign of stress from lack of light and lack of airflow and just being crammed in so tightly in these green walls. And getting rid of those yellow leaves is going to help give it some more space, give it some more air, give it some more light. All right, so we've now rotated all of them, and this is why you shouldn't wait too long to rotate. You can see that they're going to start growing back up and looking good again, but right after we rotated them, they do look kind of funny. So try to get on that rotation as soon as possible. If I had done this 2 weeks after we put these in, it would look more normal than what it looks right now.
When we work with green walls, you might notice some plants in green walls that we don't typically use as like regular tabletop plants. Some examples of that would be ferns. Ferns we use a lot in green walls, but we don't use them in tabletops a lot because ferns just need constant moisture. And if they start to dry out, they start to shed leaves and get really messy. So in green walls, they can get that consistent moisture quite easily. Other plants that you'll see in green walls, and some of these are really great for heading, making good heading cuts. Plectranthus, which is also known as Swedish ivy, excellent for making heading cuts. Tradescantia, Heterohelix, which is English ivy, we use that sometimes as a tabletop plant. Those are really great plants to practice heading cuts on. Another tip I have is if you have plants like Syngonium, also called arrowhead vine or Nephitis, if possible, use the dwarf varieties. If you use the dwarf varieties, they will not stretch out as much and will not need as much maintenance as the regular varieties. And also remember the importance of good light. If you're lucky enough and your green wall happens to have supplemental light, then if light bulbs go out over time, make sure that those light bulbs get changed, because having that additional light is going to help you get plant growth instead of plant stretching, and the plants will last longer and you'll get fewer yellow leaves over time. Another tip is plant selection. And as you work with green walls, if you find certain plants work particularly well, then try to use those plants more often if you can. And if you find some plants to be really challenging or difficult, you might avoid those plants. And try to put likes with likes. So in this image, you could see the calatheas, all the plants in this were getting the same amount of moisture, but the calatheas needed more than all the other plants. And so when we replaced these plants, we didn't use calatheas, we chose a type of plant that had similar water needs to the other plants that were there. Same thing with light. If you try to put plants of similar light needs and similar water needs together, the wall overall will do better. And if you have an exterior wall and you live in an environment that has winter and the plants go dormant during the winter time, in late winter, early spring, it's really important to clean up those walls, get rid of the dead stuff from the previous year so that the new growth can start coming out and the wall looks good again. And one last final thing I'll say about green walls for this month is I think one of the harder things is when you get a new green wall and you have really good looking plants, I think our inclination is to just leave it be. And I hope that in this month you've learned about some of the things that those plants are going to do because of the unique situation that they're in, the tilting of the plant and the cramming them in together like that, why it is important to start some of these practices early on. Things like rotating the plants. If it's a tray system and the plants are in their pots, start that rotation really early. And also some of those heading cuts, stay on top of that early on. And that way you'll keep that plant, those plants will last much longer and it'll be less maintenance for you in the long run. Next month, we're going to talk about green walls again. We're going to get more into the irrigation side. We're going to talk about where the water comes from in a green wall, where it flows, And if you can understand all of that, I think it'll help you more with the maintenance of it. Things like why is it so important to keep the trays clean and the tanks and how can emitters get clogged and filters. All of that we're going to get into next month.